Hey guys, Frank Speer back with you for another episode of Watch This. Going to be a really short one today. And I want to look at Jeremiah chapter 4 and compare it with Genesis chapter 1 and try to make the point to you for further study by yourself on your own, but kind of get you started here if you're not here already, of covenant creation. In other words, Genesis chapter 1, 2, etc. is not the creation of the material universe, but the restoration of a land for the covenant people, the covenant land, the promised land. So we're going to start in in Jeremiah chapter 4, and we're going to look at God's prophecy concerning a coming destruction of Judah and their land for their rebellion against God. Okay? And I'm going to make the point that what we see in Genesis is a restoration of a land that has undergone war, destruction, and the restoration there and the bringing of a covenant man into that land to start the covenant people again, to live in that promised land. And that's Adam being brought out from another place into that land, from the dust of the earth, from the dust of the land, the word earth there, dust of the ground, being brought from outside of Eden, into covenant fellowship with God in that particular geographic location. Okay? Now, I say this often, but we could look at a lot of passages that are similar to this one after war has taken place and devastated a particular geographic locale. Jeremiah chapter 4, beginning at verse 19. My soul, exclamation point. I'm in anguish. Oh, my heart, exclamation point. My heart is pounding within me. I cannot keep my mouth shut. I cannot be silent because you have heard, oh, my soul, the sound of the trumpet and the alarm of war. So here we have people scared to death because they've heard the enemy coming for war. Disaster on disaster is proclaimed, for the whole land is devastated. Remember, this is a prophecy of what's coming upon Judah. The whole land will be devastated. It's speaking of it as if it's already happened here, because it's a prophecy. Disaster upon disaster is proclaimed, for the whole land of Judah here is devastated. Suddenly my tents are devastated. My curtains are devastated in an instant. These are their homes, right? How long must I see the standard of the enemy, the war banners, the flags of the enemies coming? How long must we look at them? This is like AD 70 when the Romans came, right? With the eagles on their banners. How long must I see the standard of war and hear the sound of their trumpets? For my people are foolish, says God. They don't know me. They're stupid children. They have no understanding. They are shrewd to do evil. They're cunning and crafty in their wicked ways. But to do good, they don't know how. Verse 23. So I looked upon the land. This is of Judah now. I looked upon the land. Now hold on. I hope you're sitting down. I looked upon the land, and behold, it was formless and void. Does that sound familiar? It was without form and void. Why? Because of war. That's the context. And I looked to the heavens, and there was no light. Well, if this is talking about war upon Judah, this cannot be talking about the literal heavens, right? And there was no light in the heavens anymore. This is the same language used by Jesus and others in the New Testament for the destruction of a city, for the destruction of a people, for the destruction of their land. And I looked to the heavens, the rulers, the kings, the authorities, and there was no light anymore. It was lights out for them, if you will. Destruction. They were brought from light to darkness, devastation. And I looked on the mountains, and behold, they were quaking. And all the hills were moving back and forth, to and fro. Okay? This is because of the great army that came against them. It's apocalyptic language of devastation by armies. Watch this. And I looked, and behold, I looked upon the land, and behold, there was no man. Sound familiar? Sounds like Genesis, right? There was no man in the land. The land was without form and void. Then God created a man. He created. He formed. He brought a man into that land and rejuvenated the covenant land after a destruction very similar to this. Watch this. I looked, and behold, there was no man, and all the birds of the heaven had fled. Think that the Bible really here is concerned with birds that fled during a time of war? You think the Bible really cares that God was concerned that there was a great war and birds flew away? No, the birds are the rulers, the leaders. Right? Think about Jesus' parables about the seed of the gospel being planted in the earth, in the land of Israel. The gospel is a seed in the parable. Right? It's all metaphor. And it was sown in the land of Israel. The gospel was preached in Israel. And the birds of the air came and snatched away that seed. Who were the birds? The Pharisees, the Sadducees, the priests, the rulers of Israel. And I looked, behold, there was no man. All the birds of the heaven had fled. And I looked, and behold, the fruitful land, sounds like Genesis, the fruitful land had become void, a wilderness. All of the cities were pulled down before the Lord and before his fierce anger. For thus says the Lord, the whole land shall be a desolation, shall be desolate. Sounds like Genesis. Yet I will not execute a complete destruction, because he would rebuild again and put his people back there. This is what's happening in Genesis chapter 1 and 2, folks. It's the same thing. For this the land shall mourn, and the heavens above will go dark. Now flip over to Genesis 1. We see the same things here. And watch this. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Went blurry on you there, sorry. In the beginning, God created his covenant people. All throughout the scriptures, they're called the heavens and the earth, the rulers and the subjects of God's covenant people. And they're delineated here in a metaphorical fashion as animals and birds and so forth, even as plants. We see that in the book of Revelation. We see the prophecy, don't destroy, don't harm the grass yet. Well, we know that that's talking about people, Israelites. A third of the grass was burned up. The word literally is better translated herbs, as here in Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Well, this is the old covenant system, this old covenant system under Adam. John chapter 1, describing the new covenant system, uses the same language. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, right? And that Word, that he came as light and shone in the darkness of the old covenant system that apostatized from God, that had become sinful and law transgressors. They become lawless and vile and pagan, almost in many ways. It's the same language, folks. And watch this. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the land. That's the better translation, right? Eretz in Hebrew. But the land was formless and void. There it is. And darkness was over the surface of the waters. And it goes on. And we're not going to exposit all this. I've done this before in other videos. Then God said, let there be light. What did we just read in Jeremiah? There was darkness in the land after the war, and there was no light. It says in the heavens. What does this say? And darkness was over the surface, right, of the waters. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, the subjects and the covenant people and their whole system, their world. And it was destroyed here. And he looks upon it and he sees that it's devastated. And then he begins the rebuilding of it. And he brings the birds back. And he brings the animals back. And he brings man back. You see? This is covenant. This is language of covenant. So we'll leave it there. It's your job now to take this and run with it. And as you read through the whole Bible from start to finish over and again, this will pop out at you everywhere, and lights will begin to turn on. You'll be going, oh my gosh, how did I ever miss this? The only way you'll ever see it is by reading over and over again. It's like the serpents, and the devil and all of this and all what people believe about this stuff. And I've done this in other teachings, but I was just reading again today, Isaiah. Right? Watch this. This is some fascinating stuff. Who were the serpents and so forth? There's so many passages we could look at. I got to keep my fingers in these spots here. In Isaiah chapter 14, God has just, I'll say God, but the scripture just finished pronouncing judgment upon the king of Tyre in Isaiah 14 and calls him the morning star, right? The son of the dawn, who's been cut down to earth, right? Cut down. Well, where was he? In the heavens. Well, not literally. He's a king on a throne, but he's a ruler, so he's in the heavens. That's how these people saw the heavens, as the place of authority and rule, not only for Israel, but for other nations. Look, verse 12 of Isaiah 14, how you have fallen from heaven, king of Tyre. That's the context here from verse 4. The king of Babylon, I'm sorry, I said Tyre. I'm getting it mixed up with Ezekiel 28. But here, look, this is a taunt, a parable against the king of Babylon. That's the context of the entire chapter. And then he's thrown down from heaven to the earth. Well, the king of Tyre wasn't in Babylon, wasn't in heaven. Neither was the king of Tyre. They were seated on their thrones. That is the heavens in the Bible. How you've fallen from heaven, O star of the morning. How you've been cut down to the land. Right? You said, I will ascend to heaven and raise my throne above the stars of God, so forth and so on. Then it goes on. Then it pronounces judgment against Assyria and the rulers of Assyria and the people. Then it goes on to pronounce judgment against the Philistines. Now watch this. Do not rejoice, O Philistia. Don't rejoice, all of you, because the rod that struck you is broken. That was Assyria in the previous verses. Assyria was taken out by God because of the way they treated God's people. And then the Philistines were rejoicing over the fact that the Assyrians, who were their enemies, were struck down. Watch this. Don't rejoice, Philistines, because of the rod that struck you is now broken. Assyria, watch this. Because from that serpent's root, a viper will come forth. And its fruit, that is its children, its child, will be a flying serpent. It's not talking about dragons here, literal dragons, flying serpents, and literal snakes and vipers. John the Baptist called the rulers of Israel, you brood of vipers. You wicked rulers. You see? It's all through. Flip over to Isaiah 25. Let me get the passage here. Okay, I'm sorry, Isaiah 27. Talking about, now, once again, war. And the Lord about to destroy some rulers who were enemies of his people. Isaiah 27:1. In that day, right, which it just got done talking in Isaiah chapter 26 about a war that's coming, a battle. In that day, the Lord will punish Leviathan, the sea monster, the fleeing serpent. Right? Read Ezekiel 28. Read Genesis 3. Who was that serpent? Another ruler, right? A king, perhaps. Some type of leader, some type of authority figure. In that day, the Lord will punish Leviathan, the fleeing serpent, with his fierce and great and mighty sword. Now, does the Lord have a literal fierce, mighty sword? Does he come down to the earth and destroy a snake or jump into the ocean and fight a sea monster? It's all metaphor for the Lord bringing one army against another nation to destroy them. And these armies, these rulers, these leaders, these nations are called serpents, Leviathan. Even Leviathan, that twisted serpent. And he will kill that dragon who lives in the sea. The sea in the scriptures are foreigners, non-Israelites, that live across the sea from them, right? Flip over to Isaiah chapter 30. Here we have a warning against Judah for their alliance with Egypt. Now look at verse 6. Here's a prophecy concerning the beasts of the Negev, right? God is let's start from verse 1 of chapter 30. Watch this. Woe to the rebellious children of Israel, declares the Lord, who execute a plan, but it's not my plan, who make an alliance, but not of my spirit. I didn't tell you to make an alliance with Egypt, but you went ahead and did it anyway. Watch this. In order to add sin to sin, who proceed down to Egypt without consulting me, to take refuge in the safety of Pharaoh rather than me, and to seek shelter in the shadow of Egypt. Therefore, the safety of your Pharaoh will be your shame, and the shelter in the shadow of Egypt will be your humiliation. For their princes are at Zoan, and their ambassadors arrive at Hanes. Everyone will be ashamed because of a people who cannot profit them, who are not for help or profit, but for shame and for reproach. Here's an oracle concerning the beasts of the Negev. He just mentioned them, right? Hanes and Zoan and Egypt. The oracle concerning the beasts, these nations of the Negev. Watch this. Through a land of distress and anguish, from where comes lionesses and the lion and the viper and the flying serpent, and they carry their riches on the backs of young donkeys and their treasures on the camel's hump. Now, do serpents take their treasure and their riches? Do dragons take treasures and riches and put them on the backs of camels and donkeys when they plunder other nations? When they rob from others? Of course not. This lion and lioness and these flying vipers and flying serpents, these are leaders, rulers of nations. Now, we went from comparing Jeremiah chapter 4 in Genesis 1 to this. But I'm just trying to show you in these teachings of mine. There are a lot of people who say, just take the plain words for the plain words. It means what it means. No, the Bible is chock full of metaphor and simile and parable and hyperbolic, poetic, apocalyptic language to describe peoples and nations and rulers and subjects. And the quicker we understand that and the better we understand it, the better off we're going to be in our understanding of this whole thing. Right? Okay, guys, thanks for your time today. My advice, though it's time consuming and difficult to a degree, read through forget people's commentaries, forget what I'm saying, right? These are only helpful aids, but your best bet is to read through the Bible over and over. Well, how many pages does my Bible say it has? I have a New American Standard. You're looking at about 1,900 and something pages, almost 2,000 pages. So you read through it. People read 300 pages in a day. I've known people who've read 300-page novels in a day at the beach. I can't do that. I'm a slow reader. But it might take you a couple weeks. It might take you a month or two. Read through the whole Bible. Then do it again. Then do it again. And you'll begin to say, oh, okay, I'm getting it now, if you haven't gotten it already. Thanks for your time today, guys.